Vormetric is a data security company out of San Jose, California in the United States. We've been in business for around 15 years, focusing specifically on enterprise businesses, helping them protect their data at rest, their most sensitive and confidential information, helping them protect that data on-prem and in the cloud. We've been working now with Rackspace for a little over a year in the United States. So the relationship has been really focused on North America. But we've since then, just given the success there, we've expanded outside of North America and EMEA and APAC. So today I'll talk a little bit about the challenges that enterprises face with respect to cloud, and I'll share a little bit of what we're seeing in the industry from a kind of attack vectors and different things like that, as well as talk a little bit about our solution and how it can be used in the context of Rackspace. So, obviously cloud is a very big trend. Rackspace has obviously built its business on helping customers get out of the IT business, help them become more agile and more, just the ability to focus on what they do, right? I'm sure many of you out there have enjoyed that from Rackspace, just in terms of their IT services that they deliver. And I think one of the things that we see from enterprises is, how do I take advantage more of cloud? How do I take advantage of the things that or the services that Rackspace deliver, as well as other CSPs in the market? And consistently, what we hear is top security concerns: data privacy and security, access control. How do I maintain ownership of my data and really control that? How do I maintain ownership of my keys to my data, and also block access to my data from the CSP? And so, with that, let's talk a little bit about breach statistics in the market. There's two surveys that recently came out, and one is from the ITRC, the Identity Threat Research Center out of San Diego. They sort of monitor the market in terms of the different threat incidents that happen in the market and how it happens. Just a few stats to throw out there. 29% of the breaches were conducted by hacking. 15% of that was really just third-party kind of subcontractors. I'm sure you're familiar with Fire and Mandiant. They do an annual report, put it out of the market. They talk and they do a lot of investigation around the incidents that happen and where it happens and how it happens. Kind of a couple things to note here out of the Mandiant report. The incidents in the market are very broad. There's not one specific industry that the incidents occur in. It's very broad, right? It's business services, legal, retail. There's just a ton of different instances, security instances in very many markets, right? The other thing that Mandiant reported in terms of these incidents is 90% of the incidents that occur are due to privileged access to the data, right? So it's not about losing the data, where the sensitive data is on a laptop or an iPhone. It's really about privileged users, the system administrators, the root users, getting access to the data, right? Or compromising that account, right? Whether it's internal or external from the enterprise, that's how the data is being breached, right? And that can be done obviously from just pure accident, right? Or it could be from a malicious attempt, right? Where the bad guys, if you will, have solicited that credential, the username and password, and have exfiltrated the data out of the enterprise. So how are enterprises reacting from all this, right? And I think if you look in the rearview mirror, the last decade, it was really about from a security context, it was about fulfilling compliance requirements, right? So maintaining your PCI, if you're a financial services firm, maintaining your PCI compliance, right? Going forward, and what we're seeing now is, because of the breaches, because of the security incidents, the topic of IT security has elevated from, the back office up to the board, right? The board level, the boards are saying, how do we prevent a data breach, right? I mean, compliance is great, but the reality is, most of the big time breaches that have occurred, a lot of these companies were PCI compliant, right? So just because you're compliant doesn't mean your data is secure. And so now it's how do we prevent a data breach incident? How do we protect our critical IP, right? How do we protect our finances and other assets as part of our business, right? And also just fulfilling the requirements that the customers are putting on the enterprise, right? If I do business with you, I want to make sure that my data is protected, right? And I want to make sure my data is secure and private, right? So, couple more slides here on just industry trends. And we do a survey every year called our Insider Threat Report. We actually partner with others in the industry, partner with Rackspace and Cloud Security Alliance. And we go out in the market and we interview and survey. I think this year we did around 800 enterprises in the market. We did that globally, so we did it in the US, UK, Germany, Japan, and other regions. And we talked about, I'll just cut to the chase. And by the way, this report is in our booth. The booth is directly behind me. We have this report available. It's a free copy on our booth if you're interested in reading it. But I'll just cut to the chase. We asked what we thought, or we asked these enterprises what they thought the most dangerous insiders were with respect to things going on in their environment. These three popped up as the top three. Privileged users, so those users that have system administrative access into the enterprise data, root users. The US actually ranked that the highest. Contractors and service provider employees also identified as an important threat to protect against. In the UK, that actually popped up as the biggest threat. 51% of the enterprises that we surveyed labeled that as their top threat. And then just partners with internal access, right? U.S. was another leading one here. And so, that speaks to just overall what enterprises think their threats are, right, with respect to the insiders, but also it ties back to the Mandiant report that came out, where 90% of incidents that happen are tied to these three vectors, right? Privileged insiders, contractors, or service provider administrators that have access to the data, right? So, what can we learn from the data breaches and the incidents that have happened, right? Well, a couple of things. One is the approach that we've used historically to protect the data obviously hasn't been working, right? I mean, just like you've seen, and me, you've seen, a lot of the headlines with respect to big-time companies that have been basically hacked, or there's been a data breach, a leak incident, right? So whatever we're doing historically, it just doesn't seem to be working, right? The second thing is, on these incidents is you really have to focus on, driving, or let me phrase it this way, you really have to focus on, the causation of the incident, right? And that really is the privileged user insider, right, or the insider threat, the privileged users. 90% of these incidents are being caused by, the compromising of these insider accounts, right? And obviously, this was an insider. Edward Snowden was an insider, and had privileged access into data and leaked it, right? And we are a solution in the market that actually prevents and protects against the insider threat. So, as you think about your own approaches to security and locking down data, here's just a few considerations for you to think through, and I mean, regardless of Vormetric, just as you look at the industry and kind of think through your own protection of your data, these are some important considerations for you to think through. One is overall data protection, right? Identifying the actual data that's sensitive and confidential and should be locked down, right? The second thing around this data protection context or category is there's a lot of different solutions out there that can protect data. You want to take advantage of a solution that has maximum coverage from a use case perspective. Unless you want to add complexity into your environment and cost, management cost, you could, in theory, have dozens of different tools and solutions that could protect the data, right? So when you're looking at these data protection solutions, you need to minimize it down to one or two, right? A single pane of glass that maximizes data protection across different use cases. Key custodianship. When you encrypt data, you create a key, right? You shift the risk from the data itself. When you transform that data from ones and zeros using an algorithm, you create a key based on that algorithm, right? And so now the risk is in the key management, right? So best practice is enterprises like to maintain ownership of those keys, right? And the other model that we've seen in the market is sometimes the service provider owns those keys, right? But from a best practice perspective, as you think about solutions, you need a solution where you as an enterprise can maintain ownership of that key. The third is control policies. So when you encrypt the data, you want to make sure that ultimately there's policies on top of that control access to that data. Who can get access to the data? In the clear, what groups, what applications, what locations, what IP address, those types of policies that you want to be able to wrap around the access control around that data. And then finally, security intelligence, right? It's one thing to lock down the data, control access, but you want to make sure that there's inherently an ability to monitor who's trying to get access to that data, right? So if you have a compromised account that's trying to access data from pick a country to another country, and you have that linked into your security information and event managers, you want to be able to flag that, right? And be able to take an action around that, right? So it's about actionable intelligence and having that solution generate some kind of actionable intelligence so that you can take action to protect the data. So those are just a few considerations that anyone, you should be thinking through in terms of protecting your data. So one thing just to dive down on this, the encryption effectiveness or the ability to encrypt data is there's a couple of different ways that you can think about encrypting the data. And if you think about the different layers within your IT environment on how to protect the data, you can protect it at the storage level, the file level, or at the application level. And if you think about how incidents are actually happening, so whether it's malicious insiders or malware, or someone's trying to just physically steal the data, right? Pull the drive out of the SAN. Those are the ways that you can an attacker can get to the data. If you encrypt at the storage level, the only thing you're protecting against is really physical theft of the drive, right? So, just a short story here. My wife was driving along the other day, and on the dashboard it was blinking. Something was wrong with the car, and I didn't know what was wrong with it. I said to her, "Hey, we need to take it into a mechanic to look at it because I'm not a mechanic. I don't know what these errors mean. We need to take it to a mechanic." Oftentimes, what I see in the industry is I see enterprises relying on their storage guys to help them protect their data, and this, if you're leveraging a storage level encryption, the only thing that you're protecting is physical theft of the drive, right? And the reality is, how many dump trucks are being backed up into a data center and drives are being ripped out and stolen, right? Not much. In fact, I don't think any, right? So the way to protect against the incidents that are happening in the industry is really at the file level or the application level, where a lot of the incidents that are happening are with malicious insiders or malware that's basically trying to compromise and steal credentials, right? So it's important to basically look at what you're trying to protect against. If you're trying to protect against physical theft, okay, great. Encrypt at the storage layer. If you're trying to protect against malware insiders or malware insiders or just privilege insiders or malware, you need to encrypt at a higher level, right? So. So here's sort of an approach that we often tell our customers. When you think through the security requirements that you need as it relates to protecting data, access control, encryption, auditing, key management. You wrap that around your data and ultimately end up with some pretty good business results, right? Where you're out protecting your data, protect your brand, you're securing your intellectual property, you're establishing trust with your customers, right? Not only that, but you're able to expand and take advantage of what the cloud has to offer, right? The agility, the cost, getting out of the IT business, and really doing what you do best in terms of delivering products or services to your end customers. So here's basically what we do and how we do it. We have there's basically two components. One is our data security manager, which is our key manager. That can be delivered in a physical or virtual format. Typically, those are delivered either in the enterprise or in the cloud provider, where only you have access or the enterprise has access to the keys and policies around how you protect your data. We have an agent that resides on servers. That is where the data is encrypted and decrypted, and also where access policies are enforced, right? So when a root or system administrator comes in to access the data, it's that privileged user is blocked. It can't access the data in the clear. However, the system administrator or user can still replicate the data, back it up, do the things that the root and system administrator needs to do, but not accessing the data in the clear, right? So it reduces quite a bit of the risk, right? 90% of these incidents that happen because this individual in the environment has access to the data, right? However, with the solution, it lets the user be able to go in there and do what he or she needs to do his or her job, right? That's basically kind of our solution in a nutshell. And then finally, when this resides in the cloud, the cloud administrator, the storage administrator also doesn't have access to the data, right? So one very quick slide on overall performance, because we always get this question. When you put an agent on a server, obviously encryption's not for free. What is the overall performance impact for actually encrypting the data and maintaining these policies? We've been in business for over 15 years. We spent a lot of money on research and development and intellectual property. This is actually, we've got it down to where we're only impacting the CPU kind of single digits, right? Based on our experience and how we built our solution. So this is basically what you get when you take advantage of Vormetric with Rackspace. You have a secure cloud container where the data security manager, the key manager, resides on premise at the enterprise. The business unit user can access all of the compute infrastructure within Rackspace, where there's absolutely no impact to getting access to the data, so it's completely transparent. And everyone else is basically blocked because they don't need access to the data, or they shouldn't have access to the data. The enterprise system administrator, the privileged user, the root, APT and malicious insiders that have overtaken and pretending to become a system administrator or a privileged user. Cloud provider administrator at the hypervisor layer and the storage layer is also blocked. They can't access the data. And so this is the model that we're going out with enterprises to help protect their data as they move and enable themselves with more cloud infrastructure, more cloud services. So I've talked for 20 minutes. Any questions? Because that's all I had prepared for today.
After you wash the car.
The question was, what happens to my wife's car? I brought it into the mechanic. The mechanic said, hey, this is just a standard kind of thing where, you've got your 90,000 mile tune-up or whatever it is. So it wasn't a big deal. But the point of my story there was, I need to bring it in my car to someone who knows what's going on. And when I think about protecting my data, I don't necessarily rely on the storage guys to tell me how to protect my data, right? And storage level encryption doesn't do anything other than protect against physical theft. But great question. The policies that you put around your data, you basically let the end user free and clear go be able to access the data, right? So the only thing that you're doing is the policies that you create is you limit it to just the privileged user, right? So everyone else will be able to, at least from a business user perspective, be able to access the data. We're completely transparent in terms of we sit below the application, but above the operating system. And so the user just comes through. The agent recognizes that particular IT user group or application needs to be able to get access to the data. The agent on the fly decrypts the data, and so the user doesn't see anything. There's no impact, right? So that hopefully that answers your question. So it is multi-tenant. So we have enterprises today. So there's kind of two ways to think about the multi-tenancy aspect. One is we have enterprises today leveraging our solution. You're able to take that data security manager and create different domains. Those domains are basically allocated within an enterprise to different departments. So we have the HR department and their keys. We have the R&D department and their keys, and the finance department and so forth, right? So that's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is, we do have service providers that are today leveraging that same domain model and carving it up by different customers. So domain 1 would be customer 1, domain 2 would be customer 2, 3, and so forth, right? We're in Fortune 17 of 30 companies, right? We scale up to thousands of servers that we've been deployed upon on one customer. The impact of the agent on the processing unit, the processing piece of that server is minimal. I mean, that's just part of us sort of optimizing our intellectual property, but we also take advantage of ASNI chipset, so we offload the crypto function to the hardware. So we do a lot of, quote unquote special sauce to minimize the actual impact that the agent has on the CPU cycles for that particular server, right? Whether it's physical or virtual, yeah. Does that help? Okay, great. So it's fairly simple. Usually large enterprises are taking, we fire up 2 data security managers. We pair them for HA purposes. We then identify what data actually needs to be protected, what servers, right? We install the agent on the server, right? If there's data that's existing there on the server, you have to go through a process of transforming that data from unencrypted data to encrypted data. That's a pretty simple process, right? So we have a data transform utility that does that fairly efficient, very, very efficiently, quite frankly. Or if it's a new server, there's no data transformation. You just install the agent, right? Then what you do is you go into your data security manager and you set policy. The policies that you set around that particular server is sent to the agent. The agent is kind of communicating back and forth with the DSM, and then you're essentially complete. As long as the agent is there and can get access to the DSM from a communication perspective, you're set. The model that we've engaged with Rackspace is we, Vormetric, do the installation on behalf of Rackspace customers, right? So you engage with our professional services team, where we have a team. We actually have a team here in London. We have teams in the U.S. and Asia to go, in some cases, land on site to do the professional service, the installation or the implementation, or we can do it remotely. Yeah, so the nice thing about our solution is you can have a server that has both encrypted and unencrypted data on it at the same time. The policies that you configure is you can get it down to basically a file that you want to encrypt, a folder, multiple folders, so you can kind of zoom in and zoom out on what data that agent is encrypting, right? So it's not a, the entire server is encrypted or not. It's you get to configure what data on that server is encrypted, right? And that data can be in the format of structured data, unstructured data. We support, since we're transparent, we sit underneath the application. It's, all the major databases as well as, custom applications, right? The reality is, if you send encrypted data to the cloud and you're trying to access that data that you sent to the cloud, the agent that's accessing that data needs to have the same key that you used on-prem to encrypt the data, right? Okay? Otherwise, you can send the data to the cloud unencrypted and have it encrypted there and drop it down into storage, right? So it's very flexible. You can decide what you want to do. Our data security manager can be delivered in two formats. One is virtual, the other is hardware, right? They're both functionally equivalent. The question for you as an end customer is, do you want a higher level FIPS certification, which is the hardware piece? And if you want an HSM, a hardware security module that you want to drop in that data security manager, that's also a configuration we support. So you can absolutely use an HSM in a hardware data security manager. Okay? The agent obviously is software. Yeah. So we support unstructured data, structured data, right? From a structured standpoint, from a database standpoint, we're protecting, SQL, MySQL, Oracle, SAP, it's not database, but so there's databases that we absolutely support, and then on the unstructured side, we see everything: files, media files, Office files. I mean, it's just anything, right? And so since we sit below the database, below the application, it's completely transparent.
Server.
Yeah, server level. So the answer is yes. Yeah, we do both types of data. If you have an end user that has access to the data, that end user is going to have access to the data in the clear, right? If that end user pulls that data or exfiltrates that data, we can't protect that. I mean, it's left the enterprise as, the end user's gone rogue, and the data is now on a laptop or something, and that's not something we protect against.